His expertise has been further honored through his work as an international consultant on various projects and programs across several countries, including the USA, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Laos, the Philippines, and Vietnam. He has worked as a consultant to several major international organizations such as the United Nations Development Programme, UN Women, the United Nations Population Fund, the World Bank, USAID, and the Asian Development Bank. He is currently the chair of the Global Parliamentary Forum for Evaluation. In addition to his professional and academic pursuit, he has been a Member of Parliament since 1994, representing the Kegol district. Over the years, he has held several key ministerial positions, including the Minister of Higher Education and Vocational Training, Minister of Highways, Higher Education, Science and Technology and Investment Promotion, Minister of Public Enterprise Development, and Minister of Highways, Petroleum and Petroleum Resource Development. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to Honorable Kabir Hashim.
The first thing that came to my mind was that my friend Harsha Silva doesn't need to go for a jog in the morning because he's walked more than a kilometer on the stage, I think. So, he's lucky. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and my incredibly thorough colleagues who have left me with the unenviable task of speaking last. For me, I seem to have drawn the short straw because all the substance has been covered by my incredible esteemed colleagues. What's actually left for me is to try to make sure you don't fall asleep, because you've been sitting here for quite a while. And I'm going to try, because they've talked policy, they've talked numbers, they've talked strategy, and here I am left to do what politicians are usually good at, talk shop, which I'm good at too. But seriously, it's not just about an economic policy. As Harsha said, it's not only even about promises, it's about a pact between us and the people of this country, of the citizens of this country. It's about a pact with the farmers, the entrepreneurs, the youth, all our people of this country. It's so important. We reject the notion that growth and equity are mutually exclusive. If you noticed our presentation, our vision is inclusive growth, where the rising tide will carry all boats, including the small boats, not only the big yachts of the few. I came to my mind that Christine Lagarde, who was the managing director of the IMF, one of the best managing directors, when she was retiring around 2015, in a speech she spoke about many countries where economic growth has failed to lift the small boats. And in many cases, the poor and middle-class households had felt that their hard work and determination alone was not enough. And they also felt that many were convinced that the system was rigged and the odds were stacked against them. Her message was, at that time, to reduce excessive inequality. How relevant it has become in the world today. Yes, we will be bold, but we will also be responsible. We are not afraid of hard choices in the SJB because we know the stakes, because the stakes are high. You know, I remembered something today which I thought I'll take the chance and tell you all this. I remembered a story. I found this piece of paper when I was rummaging through my drawer. This is a piece of paper I wrote when I was 16 years old as a student about socialism, communism and capitalism. And I just took it up and I rewrote the little thing because I wanted to tell you this story because it gives us a strong message. The story is about the modern little red hen. Once upon a time there was this little red hen which lived in a farm, and it was scratching around in the barnyard when it found some grains of wheat. And it called out to the neighbors and said, if we plant this wheat, we will have bread to eat. Who will help me plant it? Not I, said the cow. Not I, said the pig. And not I, said the duck, and not I, said the goose. Then I will, said the little red hen, and she planted the grains of wheat. This wheat grew and opened into golden grain. Now again she asked, the little red hen asked, who will help me reap my grain? Not I, said the duck. Not in my classification, said the pig. I'll lose my seniority, said the cow. And I'll lose my unemployment compensation, said the goose. Then I will, said the little red hen, and she reaped the grain. At last it was time to bake the bread. And she asked again, who will help me bake the bread? And everybody, as usual, that will be overtime for me, said the cow. I'll lose my welfare benefits, said the duck. I am a dropout and I have never learned, said the pig. Well, if I am to be the only helper, that is discrimination, said the goose. Then I will, said the little red hen. And she baked 5 loaves of bread and held it up. Now when they all saw the bread, they all wanted a part of the bread. In fact, they demanded that the bread should be shared. But the little red hen said, no, I baked the bread. I work for it. I eat it myself. Then what did the neighbors do? Excess profits, yelled the cow. Capitalist leech, cried the duck. I demand equal rights, shouted the pig. And the goose just screamed out. Then they hurriedly painted unfair picket signs and marched around shouting obscenities. Now, this is a very common thing that we've seen around happening in our country and in many other countries. I want to give you the message that we believe in equality, in social justice, but it is crony capitalism that we will not tolerate. There will be zero tolerance, as my friend Iran said, as Harsha said. For entrepreneurship, we will support the local domestic entrepreneurs. For those who are working hard to be globally competitive, to build a domestic industry that's strong, that can face up to competition the world over. Like the little red hen, for those who are entrepreneurs, the opportunity, what the government can do for you is what we'll stand up for. Ladies and gentlemen, as I told you, you heard numbers, you saw strategy, and you saw what we are going to do policy. I want to tell you why you should believe in Sajid Premadasa and not the other candidates. I want to tell you that there are other candidates. The country has to make a choice. This is about one of the most crucial elections in our country. It's going to make or break our country. One of the other candidates, Honorable Annakumara Dissanayake, spoke about his policy, and his party swears by the socialist policy. His party swears by it, but his manifesto contradicts it. Where do they stand? Either they are fooling their cadre or they are fooling the public. That's a question that we need to ask. The key tagline that they've been talking about is the Hatta Hatare Sape. Hatta Hatara Vasare Sape. This has gone on and on. Is it the myth or is it the truth? You need to understand that. So I need to revisit the past to tell you, because this is for you to make up your minds. In 1948, our country got independence. In 1948, the last governor, the British governor, was Lord Salisbury. When Lord Salisbury was handing over our country, he did a report. And in that report, he says, in 1948, Sri Lanka's majority of the people lived in abject poverty. They lived in servitude. That was the society that our leaders inherited in 1948. I would like to show you the first slide here. In 1948, our literacy rate was something like 35%. 65% of our people couldn't read or write. By 1994, it came to 94%, near 100%, because of free education. That was a change. In 1948, our life expectancy was just 45 years. People died at 45, majority of them. Life expectancy went to 75 years because of free health. Then, in the next slide, you will see that food security. When we took over in 1948, there were only 6 million people. The population was just 6 million. And we produced only 36% of our rice production in this country. 66% was imported. But by 1994, we had a 15 million population, but we became self-sufficient in rice. That was how Sri Lanka moved on. So, is that the 74 years Hatta Hatare Sape? How did we change that? So, in the next slide, I want to show you. There was a paradigm shift in 1977. Some people say the beginning of the end was in 1977. But the end of the beginning came much later. I'll tell you how that happened. But in 1977, we did a paradigm shift and we moved the country to an export-led economy. The next slide, please. So we had an export-led economy, right? At that time in Sri Lanka, in 77. And there we built up the free trade zone, the government industry, foreign employment, and foreign direct investment. When you take the foreign direct investments during that period, I need to remind you that there was the leftist socialist movement that kept on intervening and obstructing any development and moving forward. At that time, when there was a road being built in 1967 in Vellavaya, a simple road, it was a long straight road for kilometers, one straight road. And the JVP and the leftists took up the position that this road was being built for USA, American planes to land on them. That was how ridiculous was the allegations that was made. In 1980s, there were Japanese companies like Toyota, Mazda and Honda, along with other international investors who came in to set up factories in Sri Lanka. But the JVP protested. And they disrupted the economy at that time, and all these companies left Sri Lanka and went away. And they invested in Thailand and in Malaysia. And the automobile industry has grown in those countries. That was the opportunity that we missed. Calculate this and see. In the global value chain, when you look, the intermediary accessories production, the industrial production, including vehicles and vehicle spare parts, is one of the main components of exports in the world today. If you look at it as a percentage of total exports, because we lost that opportunity. Thailand exports 48% of their exports in intermediary products and accessories like that, and in the automobile industry. Malaysia exports 42%, and Sri Lanka still stands at 5%. So you can see the missed opportunities. One other glaring issue that I needed to show you is that Sri Lanka, the loss in education, what happened? Because the JVP's only consistency is their inconsistency. I saw their manifesto. In their manifesto, in the JVP manifesto, they talk about private education. And now they talk about regulating private education. But in the 1980s, there was a white paper on education, which was groundbreaking to bring up our skills to international standards. But the whole country was almost burnt down when that paper was brought, and they stopped the move. In 1980s, there was a move to bring a non-profit private medical college, a government-supported not-for-profit medical college. Dr. G.M. Heen Nilame was made the doctor in charge to set it up. J.R. Jayawardena, the then president, set it up, and he opened it on the 21st of September in 1981. The Radha Private Medical College. And the JVP started opposing it. In 1988, the JVP set fire to the administrative building. And by 1989, President Premadasa, under severe pressure, had to shut it down. But other people were watching this. Mahathir Mohamad looked at this. The moment he saw they were closing it down, he got his Minister of Education to talk to the faculty of all the professors who were in the medical college. And he took the whole lot over to Kuala Lumpur, set up the same university in Malaysia. Today it is the International Medical University. Today, every year, 125 Sri Lankan students go and study there. You can calculate the economic loss for our country. We could have set it up in our country. Friends, this was the loss we made at that time. However, the next slide please. With all these challenges, Sri Lanka's position in 1994, as you can see, our exports as a percentage of GDP went up to 32%. Our government revenue as a percentage of GDP was 22%, which is by far any developed country has those figures. We were in par with the emerging tigers, and we were along with those countries. In 1980s, Deng Xiaoping, the president of China, sent a delegation to Sri Lanka to look at our FTZ and to copy the model and to set it up in China. They did the exact copy. And today China is the economic powerhouse of the world. But because of the leftists blocking every move for Sri Lanka to expand, we got stuck in the mud. That is why we needed to change. Now, economists, next slide please. Economists in Sri Lanka refer to 2004 as the trigger point at where our crisis started. Why do they say this? Because in 2004 there was a JVP Rajapaksa alliance government formed. And what happened? Next slide please. In 2001 to 2004, that period, there was a government which understood that we had to make some structural changes. We had to go for some massive reforms. And those proposals were made to reform the public sector, the CEB, the CPC, also restructure inland revenue, which we are still talking about, the customs and SOE reforms. That was in 2001, 2002. However, that was blocked by the JVP. They got together with the Rajapaksa government, toppled that government, started a hate campaign. They talked about various things and anti-market reforms, and then they stopped the whole process. As a result, next slide. As a result, what happened was the JVP Leftist Alliance government was formed. And between 2004 and 2015, if you take the SOEs, the losses of the SOEs came up to nearly 1 trillion. So you can imagine what happened. And also if you take the public service, actually between 1994 and 2004, there was an attempt to reduce the number of people in the public service. It came down. But again, from 2004 to 2014, the number of people in the public service went up. These all are reasons why we have got into this position. We need to understand why and who is responsible for this. Next slide, please. Eventually, if you look at the result, what happened with the JVP Rajapaksa alliance, with the leftist alliance, when we ended up, when you look at our public debt figures, for 56 years, from 1948 to and up to 2004, that was 56 years, our public debt was rupees 1,996 billion. However, from 2004 to 2014, within 10 years, it goes up by 500% to 9,953 billion rupees. So look at, it's scary when you look at those numbers. Our exports come down from 32% to 12%, and it drops even further. And our government revenue drops from 22% to 10%, now it's even below that, So these, actually, if you look at it, you understand the Hatta Hatare Sapya, where it lies and who's responsible. This country could have made the change. We were one of the first in Asia to make the change to look at the export-led economy. We were the one to start the free market economy. But because of leftist protests and policies, Sri Lanka could never get ahead. All the countries in the region capitalized on that. The visionaries were in our country. It was just that they were not given the political chance to do it. And if you don't have a mindset change, you're going to be in the same place again. That is why we are telling you this election is crucial for all of us. Because how we decide is very important. It's not with emotion, but it's how you think. Dear friends, I would like to say that that is why we are thinking about change. There's one more candidate, right, on the other side, Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe. His economic model is mostly neoliberal. He's talking about a neoliberal model. It pursues a policy of total deregulation of markets. As you know, this leads to numerous harmful socio-economic consequences ending in poverty and deterioration of income distribution. Eventually, as you see, the world over, it ends up in social unrest. I would like to take an example of the developing nations. If you take the UK, there's a lot of social unrest, a lot of things that have happened in the past couple of years, mainly because of these income disparities, because of unequal distribution. You take Western Europe, they are also thinking of making changes in the neoliberal thinking. Take the USA. One good example near home is Bangladesh. They had 8% growth. With the 8% growth, they have huge social unrest. Again, because of income disparities and because of wealth distribution problems. I would like to take India as a good example. Prime Minister Modi set sights on 370 seats for his elections. He was sure he would get that majority. But the BJP government got only 250 seats. They couldn't even form a government on their own. They had to go into a coalition. But that was with India's big economic numbers, very strong numbers, 8.4% growth in the last quarter of 2023, world's fifth largest economy. But on a per capita basis, with all that, they are desperately poor. The per capita income is $2,400. Their inequality has grown. The richest 1% owns 40% of the wealth in the country. The poorest 50% own only 6% of the wealth. Staggering figures. A good illustration of that is, take Mumbai. Mumbai is their financial capital. There is no starker demonstration of disparity and discontent. This financial center, Mumbai, is home to both Mukesh Ambani, Asia's richest man, and it is also home to Dharavi, the world's third largest slum. So you can imagine what big capital does. It doesn't solve all your problems. Ladies and gentlemen, what does SJB stand for? My colleagues explained to you. They spoke about good governance. They spoke about inclusive growth. They spoke about the economic numbers, the policy, how we are going to get this done. Because we've seen this. We've seen the issues, we've studied it, and we think that Sri Lanka has to take the right decision. That's why our political ideology, next slide please. That's why our political ideology and our economic model rests very importantly. Whilst our political ideology is based on social democracy, our economic model is derived from it, which is the social market economy, which fosters equitable growth by harnessing the power of the markets whilst ensuring economic justice and social protection for all. This is very clearly stated in the blueprint. That is what we stand for. We are very clear with our policy. We are not like others who change. They say the same thing and contradict it in the next page. Everything we say, we stand for it. That's how important it is. Political and economic stability actually is a primary requirement for growth. Without political and economic stability, you can't do it. But political, economic and stability is like having a 3-layer cake on your lap when you're traveling in a 3-wheeler on 3rd Cross Street at breakneck speed with a 3-wheeler driver taking you through. Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy our president is here. I would call him our president. Because when we started, there was a perception that there were 3 front runners. Now there is only one front runner, and the others are just runners. So I'm so happy to continue with our president here. I'd like to tell you all, you experimented in 2019. That experiment failed miserably. We crashed. There are countries that have collapsed more than once for choosing the wrong government, the wrong leaders. We could collapse again if you make that wrong choice. That's how dangerous it is. That's how important this election is. In Sri Lanka, in the king's days, one of the greatest rulers, one of the greatest kings who ruled Sri Lanka was Mahaparakrama Bahu in the period of 1153 up to 1186. He was the first king, he was the first ruler in Sri Lanka to set up export processing zones in Dakshina Lanka. He set up the EPZ, export processing zones, and it was called Antaranga Durya. The Antaranga Durya had special officials to manage it. That's how far the king thought. The Antaranga Durya went so far that the king even sent ambassadors in the 12th century to Egypt and other countries to promote trade. And he prepared our exports for cinnamon, for gems, honey, ivory, and processed timber. See how far the king thought. That was one of the greatest periods of Sri Lanka's economic growth at Mahaparakrama Bahu's regime. What I would like to tell you is, for what Honorable Harsha De Silva and Honorable Eran Vikramaratne have presented, the blueprint, a model that is practical, that can move this country to another dimension. We have an opportunity with a president, with a leader such as Sajith Premadasa, an era beyond that of Mahaparakrama Bahu's reign, an era to capture the world market, an era of inclusive growth and shared prosperity. Sajith Premadasa for president. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, yet another very insightful presentation on the way forward, the vision for the future as we unfold to all of you present here this momentous evening. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we all put our hands together one more time to Honorable Kabir Hashim for that insightful presentation. Thank you very much.